Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Make America Civil Again. Before we begin, I always say like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you can be notified that your favorite YouTube speaker, interviewer, whatever you want to call me, has posted a new video, because I post one every Wednesday. Alright, so today is going to be a little different. It's just me again, but I want to talk about something that I think is very important. Right now in our country, we are extremely divided, right? I mean, the left and the right essentially hate each other. Right now, I don't know where you're sitting, you the viewer, I don't know if you're Republican or Democrat, but my guess is probably you're more like me on the right. You're probably more conservative. Now, I have a problem with that. Now, I don't have a problem with you watching the video by any means, but I have a problem with that because the whole thing about this Make America Civil Again is for that not to happen. I have an Instagram account. I'll leave a link in the bio so you can definitely go there and check it out. But on my Instagram, I try to get people on the left and the right. And I think the problem with America is we're just that, on the left or on the right. Never do we really have much conversation with people on the other side. Now, I'm sure if you're watching this, you might be one of those that might have a conversation with someone who might be a leftist, or if you're a leftist, you might have conversations with those who are on the right. But you tend to want to avoid politics, I assume. Now, if you do, that's fine, but I think that's part of the problem, right? Because we live in what we call echo chambers, right? And what an echo chamber is essentially is you say things, and whenever you say things, you hear it coming back to you, right? In the echo chamber, you hear the same thing being repeated. And we live within our own little bubbles where that very thing happens, right? To where I say things to someone who already agrees with me, right? So when you live in an echo chamber, all you're gonna hear is what you think, and that's not good. And that's where I live, right? I can attest to the fact that most of the people around me think a lot like me. Yeah, there may be some nuances and differences and things like that, but for the most part, most of the people I talk to agree with me on quite a bit of things. So that's a problem, and I think it's a big problem because that's not going to help me understand someone else. Now, on my Instagram, as I said before, I actually get to converse with people who are on the opposite side of the table as me. And it makes it very interesting because even though I might disagree with them and they might disagree with me, we actually like each other. There's been a few people on Instagram. There's, as a matter of fact, one person that I grew up with. She lives in California now, but even when we messaged back and forth, I noticed little things about her personality, and we were able to get along. It's males, females, a couple different people. Now, there are people who message me that agree with me, and we have a good conversation, but for the most part, I usually talk to people who are on the left. And I love it because what they force me to do is think about my position more. And what ends up happening is I tend not to agree with them, but to think more about my position. But then here's a cooler thing, is I don't dislike that person. And I think that's the key problem. We have been pitted against each other as a country. We listen to CNN or Fox News, and we tend to think like the people we listen to. And when they tell us things about libtards or about Trumpicans or about bigots and racists on the right, we tend to begin to start viewing those people with those ideas that way when they probably aren't like that at all, right? And I said this before plenty of times, especially on my Instagram, but I really think it's true. And I want to keep on saying it because that's at the heart of where I'm at. I'm sick and tired of hearing it. Now, I think this has happened historically though. Now, other people might find other references and that's fine. But I think this happened historically here in the United States. A man by the name of Willie Lynch set forth this same exact kind of propaganda that we hear today. And Willie Lynch was a slave owner in the West Indies. He was a British man. And he was asked to come over here, and he came through the James River, and he talked to a whole bunch of slave owners that lived here. And I'm going to read some of the things that he says. I have some paper right here, and I want to read to you guys some of the things that Willie Lynch said. And I want you guys to hear this because I really want you guys to hear what he says and how this resonates for today and how important it is that we hear that. Hear this. All right, so Willie Lynch, like I said before, was a slave owner. And in 1712, he came over to help slave owners have a better grasp on their slaves, how to keep them slaves, at least slaves in the mindset. But before he starts by talking about where he came from and what he's done in the past and things. It's not very long, so I highly suggest you read it. But then he goes on to say this: my method is simple. Any member of your family or overseer can use it. I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves and make the differences bigger. So he's found the differences, right? So they're nominal differences. They're not huge. But what he tends to do is you find the differences and you make them seem like they're actually a lot bigger than they are, right? And so this is how he does them. He outlines it in 3 ways. He says, I use fear, distrust, and envy for control. And then he goes on to give different examples of differences like age group or maybe skin tone. He talks about intelligence, maybe your sex, or maybe your size. So he goes on and talks a little bit about that. But this is the part I really want you to hear. All right, he says, I assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy is stronger than adulation, respect, and admiration. The black slaves, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black male versus the young black male, the young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slave versus a light-skinned slave, and the light-skinned slave versus the dark-skinned slaves. You must use the female versus the male, and the male versus the female. You must also have you white servants and overseers distrust all blacks. So the overseers must distrust the blacks. So you need to cause a difference there, because these white men, sometimes with overseers, were slaves themselves. So they're both slaves, but you must make them an overseer. So that little difference, by giving them a little power, make it greater. But then he goes on to say this: it is necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us, the slave owner. They must love, respect, and trust only us. Gentlemen, these kites are your keys. I'm sorry, that's not what it says. Gentlemen, these kits, I'm a second grade teacher, I should know how to read. These kits are your keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensely for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually disrespectful of each other. So, if you're on the right, you don't trust the left. If you're on the left, you don't trust the right. If you're on the right, you disdain the left for the most part, and vice versa. They've pitted us against each other. They've got us thinking that we can't agree. Now, I know there's people on the far left and far right. I get that, because there are, right? You have the radical leftists who are really appearing to take over the Democratic Party when I don't think that's the case. I think there are a lot of logical thinking liberals out there who probably won't be as far left as Bernie Sanders is wanting to take their people to go. Now, if you are that far left and you believe what Bernie Sanders is saying, we need to have a different conversation, because personally, I don't agree with Bernie Sanders on a lot of issues. He may sound legit. He may sound like he wants to take care of you, but he doesn't. Because if he does, he'd be the first person to implement his policies. Right? If I want to see something work, I try it on myself first. Right? So the perfect example for Bernie Sanders is in the Fox News town hall, when he literally said that he thinks that people in his tax bracket should get 52%, but he's not even given 52%. He could. Now you say, well, no one else is. That's not the point. If you believe something, you're going to push for it. So I don't agree at that far left. I just don't. And if that's where you are, fine. Then we need to have a longer and lengthier conversation. But I think for most Democrats, they might not be that far left. Now, Bernie in the polls are only showing about 25%. So he's not that strong. So I don't think a lot of Democrats are there. And if you're on the right, I would disagree with you in trying to praise Trump for everything he's doing. I believe he's done a lot of good, but there's a lot of things that that man can work on. We can all agree on that. And if you don't agree with me on that, then again, we have a conversation that needs to be had. But my point is this. Just because I said that and you disagree with me, how'd that make you feel? Did you get uncomfortable? Did you not like what you just heard? Did it frustrate you? Did it make you want to turn this off? If it made you want to do any of those things and you didn't, you are part of the solution. If you did turn this off and you're no longer watching, you're part of the problem. And that's the goal, right? Is to deal with the problem. It's to literally deal with it, right? I'm a Christian, and as a Christian believing in the Bible, I take my example as being Jesus, right? And what happened with Jesus when things got tough? He entered into the toughness. He didn't avoid that which was hard. He pursued it, right? And we see that at the pinnacle of the cross, right? He saw our sin and decided to deal with the sin of the world. And so because that's what Jesus decided to do, I'm going to use his example. Now, when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he wept and he was very fearful of the wrath of God that was going to be poured out on him, which is right. He should fear that. We should all fear the wrath of God. But the point here is that he didn't run from it. He dealt with it. And it tells us in Hebrews that the joy set before him, he endured the cross and despised the shame. Right? So we see that about Christ. And so I want to take on that same attitude and same character. And even though things might get uncomfortable sometimes when I'm talking to people I disagree with, or when I read a message I don't like, my natural response is to not want to respond, is to get angry, is to vehemently want to disagree and just say they're not thinking rationally. Well, that person very well may be, and I'm the one that's irrational. Have you ever thought of that you might be wrong? Because you could be. Right now, Jesus was never wrong because Jesus is the second person of the Trinity, but I am, right? And that's where fault finds in myself. And so instead of always pointing the finger at everyone else, we need to look intrinsically, and we need to learn that we are the problem, but that we are also the solution. But here's the most important thing. The government is not the solution. By making a government bigger, we're not going to move forward. That's not the answer. Okay, there's been many times in history where people have made government big, and we see the end results of that. All right, everyone always says, why do you keep saying Venezuela? Why do you keep saying Cuba? Why do you keep saying Russia? Because those all happened within the past 150 years. No, I'm sorry, the last 100 years. And if we can't look that far back, we can go even further back. We can even look at Rome. Go as far back as Rome. They're the perfect example. They were just like the United States in a lot of ways. But the moment they started making their government bigger and started taking away individual liberties is the moment they started to fall as a people. Abraham Lincoln, a president that I like sometimes and don't like others, he made a very good point. He said a nation divided against itself cannot stand. A house divided cannot stand is what he said. And he's right. And right now we are divided, and our nation as a result will fall. Look, there's been a lot of talk about impeaching Trump. I was just reading an article today about it. If you believe that, fine. I think everyone has the right to have their own opinion. But when you say that, you must be sure in what you're saying. Just don't say it because someone said it. Read the information. I never read the Mueller report. I listened to people on both sides about the Mueller report, so that I can get a fair understanding of it. I listen to people who are right and people who are left, and then I try to listen to people who are more like level-headed and clear-minded about it, like Ben Shapiro, because he's not a big Trump supporter, but he definitely is a Republican in a lot of areas. He'll admit that. And I think he does a decent job in explaining it, so I highly suggest you guys go listen to Ben Shapiro and see what he has to say on it. But the Mueller report has a whole bunch of pages, 400 pages long. 200 of it has to deal with the fact that there's no obstruction. And for 2 years, CNN and MSNBC and all other liberal news sources were telling us that that's what's going to happen, is that there was obstruction, that Russia did do something, when come to find out they didn't. But now, I'm sorry, not obstruction, but there's no collusion. But now there's obstruction of justice that's being brought about. That's what I meant to say. So now there's obstruction of justice that Trump tried to tell people to lie. Right, so now that's what they're saying, because he tried to get people to lie under oath, so now he needs to be impeached. If you really believe that, I want you to do as much research so that when you talk to someone, you're informed. You're not just some person who reads the title to a newspaper article and therefore you think you have all the ideas. That's not the way it works. Okay? So no matter where you're at, I highly suggest you do your research, but you go find someone who you disagree with and have a conversation with them. Because the moment you have a conversation with someone, your perspective changes. Maybe not your ideas, but your perspective. You begin to actually respect and appreciate someone on the other side of the aisle. Right? And I think that's being lost. I think what Willie Lynch intended was pitting people against with small differences. They make them look bigger than they actually are. Perfect example is climate change. Right? No one denies climate change. But the moment you say you disagree with the Green New Deal, they call you a climate change denier. What's with that? I didn't say I denied climate change. I just disagree with the method. Right? Or if you say something as simple as, I don't think socialism works, right? Well, then they automatically assume, oh, so you want to get rid of all the aid that's given by the government? No one said that. Now, eventually, it'd be nice to have people move off of that. But right now, I think the best solution could be X, Y, and Z. Have the conversation. And yeah, it will be uncomfortable. And yes, it will be hard. And yes, it won't be easy. But that is what is necessary if we are going to see our country come closer together. We have to start talking to one another. And so my hope is to find people out there who are on the left that are willing to come sit down in this chair to the right of me, which you can't see, but there is one there, and allow us to have a conversation. That's what needs to happen. People need to see it. Once we start modeling it, our kids will be able to see it. And they say, hey, I can talk with people I disagree with, because that is not what is happening. That's not what's happening right now. The opposite's happening. We're not wanting to talk to each other more and more. And that's a problem. They're pitting us against each other. They're finding small differences. If you're black, you have to be Democrat. If you're white and you're conservative, well, you have to be a white supremacist. Or you have to be a far-right extremist. See what I mean? The moment you become a label is the moment you lose the image of God in humanity. So don't let labels become your reality. Let people become reality, because people are the reality. So I hope you guys appreciated this episode. It was short and quick, but it was my heart, guys. It truly was. I know I'm wearing my Golden Knights. They lost that tonight, but I still love them to death. Golden Knights, you're my dudes. But hey, thank you guys so much for watching another episode of Make America Civil Again. And when it comes to the name of this channel, that literally is my goal, is to make this country civil. Because we aren't right now. There's a lot of hate, a lot of anger, and a lot of bigotry, to be honest, going on. And I want to help cut through that. All right, but I need your help. So please share this channel. I want people that disagree with me to come on here so I can talk with them. So if you live within the Vegas Valley, please let me know. Leave a message in the comments below, and definitely email me at civilizeamerica@gmail.com. I will be happy to get you on here so that you can express your ideas. All right, but until next Wednesday, I'm out.